Start by turning the hips, let it sink down into the feet so that it's the legs pushing the ground, pushing and pulling the ground that turns me. So this leg straightens and then it pulls. This leg straightens and then it pulls. Pushing with the leg turns me away from the front. Pulling with the leg turns me back to the front. This leg is straightening to turn me here, and then it bends to pull me back to the front. But now as this one straightens to push me this way, this one also straightens to push this hip round. So they both straighten when you turn away from the front. And then the second one. and then riding horse. And just breathing. And most of these exercises, they start off one way and slowly become something different. So to start with, this is the hands coming in and out. But we want it really to come from the legs. So the hands come in because my legs are bending and pulling me down into them. And it's quite difficult to switch from the arms to the legs. And now reaching out, pulling in the rope, pulling in the boat. Here, I want to feel the action of the three parts of the arm, the hand, the elbow, and the shoulder. My hand starts going out, and then I get a sense that my elbow is beginning to almost take over from the hand. And then finally, my shoulder comes right away from the spine. So hand, elbow, shoulder, and each one builds in intensity. And to get the shoulder involved, I really need to turn away from the front because the shoulder comes from the back. Just feel that when the shoulder gets involved, the hand has already stopped going forwards and is beginning to come back. So the return has already established itself before my shoulder dissociates from my spine. You can feel it as like a figure of eight. So as the hand starts coming forwards, you're coming up the figure of eight effectively. And then as the elbow starts to get involved, that's where you're coming over the top of the figure of eight. And then when the shoulder comes away from the spine, that's when the hand is coming down the figure of eight. Up the figure of eight, over the top and down. Up the figure of eight, over the top and down. And then let's just try the figure of eight exercise. A figure of eight is basically what John used to call a returning spiral. So when I attack, I'm coming up the figure of eight and it's spiraling this way. So my elbow is tending to pull in and my hand is trying to veer out. Now, when I yield, I reverse that. So my elbow starts to go up and my hand starts to come down and in. That's the pronating spiral. So you've got supination and pronation. Attack and yield. And the interesting part really of the figure of eight is the waist of the figure of eight, the bit in the middle where the up and the down cross over. That's what makes the figure of eight so useful for connecting with another person, because another person looks much more like a figure of eight. You know, they've got a tightness here than they do a circle. And so I'm effectively tracing the other person's body as I do the figure of eight. I'm coming up from their foot, through their middle, into the opposite side of their body and over their head. And it's this bit in the middle, you know, that's the important bit. That's the tightness in the middle that makes it almost squeeze the other person. It's very intimate. You're as close to them as possible. There's no space left to squeeze out. Try 1 foot forwards. And now start off just going backwards and forwards. And just imagine someone standing in front of you, facing you, doing the same exercise. So each time we reach forwards, we want the sense that we're throwing this lasso over their head. So my energy is reaching out in order to capture the other person. So it becomes the figure of eight again, because what happens is, if I imagine I've got my left foot forward, so if they've got their right foot forward, so their foot is here, their front foot. Here, I'm reaching from that foot up through their body, crossing at the hips or the waist, and then over their head, and then back down. And then this hand takes their back foot, and again over their head. So I'm tracing a line through them from their foot all the way through until I get over the head. And then I get this sense that I've captured the whole person. But it's very intimate. It's not a general thing. It's not like I've thrown a net over them, this big net that's happened to catch them. I've really traced their body. So it's almost invasive. When you work with another person like this, you feel them, you feel their eyes, especially tracing your body. This is important. Otherwise, it just all remains sort of theoretical. We want to get our energy out and get our energy interacting with the other person. some with the other foot. First of all, just get it going. Reaching forwards. Cross energy. And then you begin to notice that there's another person there. You start interacting. And then just the two circles, but quite small. It's what we want to feel. We want to feel this sense of prowling. Now, when an animal is prowling, it's like its shoulders are moving first, so the shoulder is coming out. And that's getting this wave of like energy and awareness coming up, which finally gets into the hand. This is the way we would like to work. So to start with, we get the hand and then the elbow and then the shoulder, just to wake it all up. But what we'd really like is to get it all coming from as close to the spine as possible. So my shoulder is moving and that gets down into the hand. And so it becomes the two circles, but it's always got this feeling of the shoulder coming away from the spine. And to get the shoulder activated, you've got to use the elbow. So it's my elbow coming up and out that pulls my shoulder blade away from the spine. Forget about the hands. Just feel as though your arms are just all elbows and shoulders. Investigate how it feels. You know, you do get the sense of this sort of hungry animal quietly and slowly prowling through the jungle looking for the next kill. And it has to be so soft and quiet, otherwise it's going to frighten the prey away. And it's all coming from the spine, from as close to its core as possible. And then we want it slipping down into the legs as well, so that it's our legs doing this as well as the shoulder blade coming away from the spine. The sense is that my hip comes away from my sacrum. So as the shoulder comes away here, there's this sense of something has to release here to allow the hip to come out. So I need to have the weight in the opposite foot just to release the leg, and then I can get some activity in the hip. This is difficult. You think how intense you need to become to get the shoulders involved. It's like 10 times more for the hips. Elbow is pulling the shoulder away, but here it's the knee, the heel coming up. So this feeling here that I've pulled the hip around. You think the animal that's walking and prowling, it's the foot that comes off the ground in order to step. That's the one that has the shoulder or the hip working. It doesn't really, it's not really doing anything here when the feet are on the ground. And that's the feeling here. So I somehow have to release this leg. So I have to get everything into this foot so that this can release. So I can get this sense of my hip rolling around like this. And then into this foot, so this hip can roll around. And it's very much back energy. So we really have to draw in the front centers to allow the back to really swell out into this release of the hip. If I'm trying to watch it too much and I'm doing this, it's not really going to happen. So I've got to draw all these in. I'm almost huddled into myself, and that lets my hip release. Really, it's much easier practicing this when you're doing the form. So as you step, because that's really what this is. I'm stepping. So I'm sinking into this foot, and that releases the opposite leg. And then the step is actually just my hip bone scooping around into this step. So, and you can really do that in the form. Feel it coming down here. There's a sense that I've come into this fold here and helped the hip separate before I put the weight in the foot. coming leg to leg and stepping. So I pull with the leg, I push with this one to drive myself down, and then this foot can come up. And then I step out, pull, use this leg to push me into the outside edge of this foot and also down so that this can come up. I want the feeling that I've actually gone into the ground in the supporting leg before I pick up the other leg. Pressuring the leg. I'm pressuring this leg by straightening this leg. And I want that pressure to force the joints, especially my hip joint and my sacroiliac. I want to force them to sort of spring open. You think of each joint being like a balloon. And when you squeeze it, if you do it properly, it encourages the balloon to push back. So the skin of the balloon has a real sort of elastic resilience. So as I straighten this leg to push myself down here, there's a sense that this joint is expanding because of the pressure. If I was just to release, then everything just collapses. So I push here. When I've got the foot up, it's like I'm sort of balanced on a balloon. It's got a sort of spring to it. So I pull, and then I push with this leg, and everything gets squeezed into like a roundness. And then it's like the joint has a real life, a real liveliness to it. And if I sort of collapse into the inside of the foot, then it's gone. So here I'm really in the skin of the balloon. I'm in the surface, the outside edge. And what is it that keeps it sprung open and keeps, in other words, what is it that keeps me on the outside edge? And it's just spirit. Something in me has to get fierce. I become this prowling, and if you think of the prowling animal, it's like a circle, a sphere. It's prowling like this. It's all curves and scoops. And then when it decides to pounce, suddenly a straight line appears out of that just for a moment before it's then back to prowling and scooping. So that's the feeling here. I'm scooping with this foot. I'm pulling myself into this edge. And then this has to push just to force it to become totally round. Because our minds are so slack that we can't just leave it up to gravity. We've spent a whole life fighting gravity, finding a way of ignoring it. So I pull, and then this pushes me into this. It almost feels swollen. And the center inside the container is like a no-go area. I don't want to go in there. It's just full of energy. hold, and push. And I push myself and it forces everything just to swell open, the sacroiliacs, but especially on the side of the leg that's supporting me. As soon as my mind starts to get distracted by whatever, by things outside or more often by itself, then it just collapses. That swollenness disappears and I fall onto the inside of the foot. So I've got to somehow force myself into this edge. And then just, how do I stay there without letting it collapse? I've got to get more and more fierce. And now, just stepping backwards and forwards. The same idea, this feeling that I'm using the straightening leg to really drive myself down into the supporting leg so that the straightening leg can come up and step. I straighten this leg, it pushes me down here, and then this leg can bend, but it comes up instead of pulling me back into it. And then it straightens, and then it bends. This one straightens to really push me down here, and then it bends, and then this one straightens to push me down here. This thing of straightening the leg to push yourself into the foot, it's just changed everything. And what you realize is that if you just let gravity take you down, you don't have a root. You're just resting, balancing on the ground. A root is something that's gone into the ground, out of you. And it won't happen unless you make it happen. When I start pushing with this leg, that's when I can get a sense that I've squeezed into the ground. And it's such a different mind. And it makes you realize we're just taking holidays all the time, as John would say. I want to make sure I'm in the ground. So the iceberg, the body is just the tip of the iceberg, and what's underneath the ground is the rest of the iceberg. So I want this sense I've really gone down low. So I have to see it with my mind. So this is the imagination. And it's not really, I mean, to start with, it's like a fantasy. When the teacher tells you this is what is there energetically, now you've got to go away and create it with practice, then you do. You just sort of you just imagine that there's this part under the ground. But very quickly, you have to start feeling it, not just seeing it as an image, and feeling the sort of creature you need to become for that to be a reality, for imagination to become the reality. It's like the Tibetan monks, they're given these tasks of visualizing they'll have like one of those really elaborate pictures with all the demons in. And the monk has to study it in great detail so that he can actually close his eyes and just see the picture. So imagine he's practicing for months, probably, if not years, just trying to get this image complete. In time, he's going to become the creatures. There's so much association. And that's what we're doing in Tai Chi, really. You see something and you become it. And then let's step with the other foot. What I find is if I don't work in this way, if I'm slack, then I damage my knees. As soon as I get any sense of the knee collapsing in, leaving the outside edge, my knee starts to hurt. I'm going around here. And that is just the hip coming away from the sacrum. Okay. Ward off in the legs, ward off in the arms. That's easy. There's a sense here that it's the two hip bones have come away from the sacrum, not just away out to the side, but they're pulled back. Get a real sense that my hip bones have sort of grown these growths. So they've come up here and then they come around. Just establishing the ward off in the three senses. So my hips coming away from my sacrum, my shoulders coming away from the spine, and then a sense here that my occiput is splitting and each half is coming away from the center of the skull. Heart again. Danshen, hips. Back up to the heart. Head. Heart. Hips. Heart. And head, jaw. The side of the jaw loosens in the same way that the shoulder blade loosens or the hip loosens to come away from the spine. Back into riding horse. And I just feel how it swells from the back center. And that really encourages the front just to quieten down. It doesn't close, it just becomes quiet and small. And then let's just try some of this. Let's try it just using the heel a little bit more. So as one heel comes off the ground, the other heel really digs into the ground. And my toes almost come up of that foot. So the 2 feet are very much doing the opposite thing. When the heel comes up, the knee comes up and the leg bends. When the heel goes down, the leg really straightens and the toes try and raise up. Trying to get the 2 extremes as extreme as possible. And then feeling the 2 figures of 8s in the feet, 1 figure of 8 inside each foot. So the foot is really rolling. It's very healthy for the feet, this. And then just let it subside. We're just trying to train the body so that it's no longer a limitation. It's more like an inspiration. So when you get the body working, you think, oh gosh, you know, there's something's happening there in the energy. Using the body correctly will expose like energetic structures, and that in turn will spark the imagination. So everything's feeding everything in Tai Chi.